Aliens Explored is a podcast exploring famous and obscure cases of UFO sightings, alien abductions and other strange events from both a believing and a sceptical perspective whilst keeping an open mind. I'm Stu Jackson, a professional actor and amateur ufologist with a particular interest in the crop circle phenomenon. I'll be debating that otherworldly visitations are real. The truth is out there.
And I'm Neil Kelly. I'm a professional actor as well and used to work for the military as an intelligence analyst. I'll be arguing from a more doubtful point of view. I mean, it's all a bit far-fetched, isn't it?
In 1977, Steven Spielberg finished work on his long-cherished science fiction movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind. UFOlogist J.Allen Hynek was employed as a scientific consultant on the movie, and the title was taken from his graded classification of close encounters with extraterrestrials. The movie would go on to become a huge critical and financial success, but it would also become embroiled in conspiracy theories and warnings from the space agency NASA. Join us on Aliens Explored as we delve into whether this movie actually depicts real events.
Ba, 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 ba. And of course everyone recognises that tune even when it's sung as badly as me. Even you, Neil, who dropped us with a bombshell last time, didn't you?
A shocking revelation, yes.
You did.
I know. I should have my Alien Encounters t-shirt torn off my back and my headphones stamped on to do the march of shame. I know.
We are not that brutal. Welcome, listeners, to Aliens Explored, your weekly podcast where we look at UFOs, UAPs, alien abductions, otherworldly events from around the globe. I'm one of your hosts, not as brutal as Neil would have it. I'm Stu Jackson.
And I'm your other host, Neil Kelly. You forgot to mention we also review movies.
Oh, well, occasionally. Well, we're not reviewing a movie today, are we? We're going to be talking about a movie, but
not in the traditional sense of reviewing a movie, no.
Traditionally.
We won't be critiquing the acting or the storyline.
Oh, the acting's phenomenal in it. Absolutely phenomenal. Anyway.
So there we are. We've just critiqued the acting as well.
Yeah,
there's your movie review, folks.
It's 5 thumbs up from me. Yeah. So the movie in question is, of course, the Steven Spielberg blockbuster Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And we're talking this week, of course, about if there's any reality to the movie. Is it based perhaps on real events? Exciting stuff, Neil.
It is, yeah. That's quite a broad question, isn't it? Is it based on real events? Well, certainly we've had 47 previous episodes when we're talking about alien encounters, exploring the aliens. So yeah, this is a film about an extraterrestrial encounter. So Steven Spielberg, this is a long cherished project of his, wasn't it? It was something he'd dreamed about doing when he was a kid, even when he was about 11 years old, and he saw a comic shower with his dad. And then in late 1973 he developed a deal with Columbia Pictures for a science fiction film, but then when he had the blockbuster success of Jaws, he could pretty much name his price and make any movie he wanted. He's got the magic touch.
Totally.
Give him all the money he wants.
Yeah, and this is what he chose to make.
Yeah, so the title is derived from a UFOlogist J.Allen Hynek, which is his classification of close encounters with terrestrials. So the first kind is when you see them, isn't it?
Well, let's go through the classification, because there are actually several. Although Hynek himself only came up with 3 classifications, there are 7 in total now. And it's worth mentioning J.Allen Hynek. Now, he's an interesting character. He was a consultant on the movie, of course, on Spielberg's movie, but he started out effectively as a debunker, as a naysayer. And do you know what? I can see parallels with yourself here, Neil, because he was brought into the military basically to debunk UFOs. Then the more he looked into it, the more of a believer he became. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's very, very easy to start disappearing down rabbit holes when you get into this stuff.
It really is. But he famously came up with this close encounter classification system that basically, in the public domain, we probably wouldn't have heard of were it not for Spielberg's movie. No. I think that's fair to say. But yes, a close encounter of the first kind is very simply a visual. So seeing a UFO.
Yeah.
I think they say it has to be less than 500 feet or something like that away for it to count, but there's kind of like special circumstances around it. But effectively, it's seeing a UFO. Close encounter of the second kind is where there is alleged physical evidence or physical interaction from the UFO. Now, this might be leaving imprints from where the UFO has touched the ground, but it might
mutilated cattle.
Well, mutilated cattle would actually come under something a little bit later on.
Okay.
This is more of a generic physical evidence. So you might see a scorch pattern in the ground where the UFO's been. You might get static on your radio. It's that level. It's that level of contact. And a close encounter of the third kind is when you have an encounter with what is described as an animated entity. So this is not just a craft, this is a physical being. A robot, though, might count as an animated entity.
If it's come from somewhere else, yeah.
If it's come from somewhere else. But with a UFO, so again we're into this unidentified object phase. Now that was the 3 that Hynek came up with, but since then there's been 4 more classifications added. A close encounter of the fourth kind is described. I'm simplifying these because otherwise it'll take up the entire podcast. But a fourth kind is basically an abduction.
Okay.
A fifth kind is direct communication between the entity on board the UFO.
They sound like subcategories of the third kind. You meet them when they abduct you, or you meet them when you have a communication.
Well, an encounter might be just you see them through a window waving at you.
Oh, I thought, no, you actually meet them. So.
No, an encounter can be just, again, visual, but you're seeing an actual entity rather than just seeing the craft, as it were.
Have I misremembered the line in the film where, I think it's Richard Dreyfuss says, and the third kind is when you meet them? So at the end, when the craft lands and they all come out of it, that's their third kind of encounter.
Well, that was part of the problem with Hynek's classification system. Is it would be everything from seeing them through a window in the craft right the way through to any physical contact with the extraterrestrials.
Oh, so he created the extra.
So it was a bit broad. Third kind was a bit broad. That's why they've introduced these other categories. Fifth kind is direct communication. That might be physically speaking. It might be hand gestures. It might be telepathic communication. But that would be the fifth kind. The sixth kind is an interesting one. It's a range of different things that include death as a result of interaction with an entity, them channeling their thoughts into you. So I suppose they're seeing that as different from telepathy, where rather than them just communicating telepathically, they're projecting their consciousness into you. And direct mind control. So death, channeling, and control.
I can see a sequel forming here. So we maybe skip 4 and 5. We'll go straight to Close Encounters of the Sixth Kind.
Well, the seventh kind, which is the last of the list, is the creation of a hybrid between human and extraterrestrial. Now, within the movie, certainly on these other scales, there is a fourth kind encounter. There is fifth kind encounter because they all gesture with their hand movements, famously in the scene, and you've got the ba 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 ba. That is direct communication. Death channeling and control doesn't come into it, but potentially when you look at it depends on which cut you look at. It does look like there might be human hybrids in certain cuts of the movie, so potentially the seventh kind. But yeah, that's Hynek. Hynek's actually in the movie as well as being a consultant in it. He appears at one point, right towards the end. Yeah, interesting character is Hynek. So coming into this whole, is it based on real events? There's two ways of looking at this, and you've kind of alluded to one already, which is kind of like the meta referencing. Have they taken, or has Spielberg taken, a collection of witness statements of alleged occurrences and then fictionalized them, which is probably the most common perception.
He's created a piece of a verbatim piece, effectively.
Yes, but there is another possibility with this. Have you ever come across what is commonly called Project Serpo before, or Operation Crystal Night?
I have, yes.
You have?
I have, yes.
I'm impressed, because there aren't many non-ufologists who've even heard of this.
I have heard of it. I came across it the other day.
Oh, as part of your research for this? Oh, fair enough. Yeah, I was going to say, I'd have been surprised if you'd have heard of it outside of that. So share with our listeners then what Project Serpo means to you. Right. Well,
my understanding, this does it relate back to the Robertson panel?
That's been theorised,
right?
But so in its broadest sense, what is Project Serpo allegedly? Or would you like me to handle that?
Well, I know that there's a documentary about it, and a US government agents claim that they spent decades giving fake evidence of extraterrestrials to gullible ufologists in an effort to make it easier for the government to spot when the UFO community was really getting close to the truth.
That's part of the debunking of Project Serpo, or the potential debunking of it. So what this only came to light around 2005 within the ufology community. But what Operation Crystal Night is allegedly is basically an exchange program between humans and the extraterrestrials, where a dozen people, 10 men, 2 women, were sent to this planet that's been designated or called Serpo as part of an exchange program. Now, these people have all died because of the radiation involved in them travelling.
And this was back in the 60s, between 1965 and 1978, they were...
Yes, but it's only, like, the last 15 years, it's only just come to light, allegedly.
So they allegedly travelled with a survivor of the infamous Roswell flying saucer crash.
Yes.
They said they got him out of the wreckage and said they would take us to your leader, and he said, okay, let's set up a meet.
Now, bearing in mind, Project Serpo is probably a really good topic for us, because we can do an entire half hour just on this one thing. I mean, probably more besides, especially the way we waffle and go off on a tangent.
We do, yeah. So that's all the fun of it.
It bears a lot of resemblance to Close Encounters as a movie. And there's a wonderful quote from Steven Spielberg himself. I want to make sure I find it so that I'm quoting him directly. He was written a letter by NASA that basically along the upshot that Hynek had information that they did not want included.
In
now,
Spielberg's
what specifically? Movie. Yeah, what specifically that information is, but we're not sure of. But kind of the whole Project Serpo thing kind of could well be part and parcel of this. But in an interview to Cinema Papers magazine, Spielberg said, "If NASA took the time to write me a 20-page letter, I knew there must be something happening. When they read the script, they got very angry and felt that it was a film that would be dangerous." Now, he said that back in 1978. So NASA's written to him with a 20-page letter because they're angry about this script and feel it's going to be dangerous.
So, yeah, that definitely tells you you're onto something.
And it's odd for NASA, and we're talking about, I was about to say, it's come from NASA, not the military, but we don't know that.
But it's red rag to a bull, isn't it? That is really saying you're onto something here. You're going to talk about stuff that we really don't want to. We really don't want you to put out there. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink.
Yes, but given the disinformation that we know happens from the military, it could well have been from the military, really, just saying it's from NASA. But that's a very strange. And I'm inclined to think that's not something he would just make up.
No.
And it's curious he's not really talked about it.
But presumably he's still got the letter. He'd keep something like that, wouldn't you?
Oh, come on,
or
Neil,
did that disappear?
You and I have worked on big productions. The amount of paperwork and stuff that's involved. I mean, you look at big scale movies like Star Wars, like all that set's been destroyed because of the storage. So I think a letter like that will very easily get lost. I'd be surprised if he's still got it.
But it's almost an incriminating document, isn't it?
Well, I wouldn't have thought it was written with anything saying, "You're onto something."
No, but reading between the lines.
Circumstantial, and that's the thing.
You can't make this movie is way too dangerous. You're going into really dangerous territory. You don't know what you're messing with here. Yeah.
And it's undoubtedly written in such a way it's like, well, that's not what we meant at all.
Yeah.
We just don't want to create public panic. I don't know. Whatever. But it's really...
Yeah. So they expressed their displeasure that he was making this movie. Now, one of the things that happens in the movie is something we've discussed in a previous episode, haven't we, about the light coming into the car, into the sheriff's car.
Yes.
And him being knocked out for a while. Something like that happens in Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
You've got Lost Time. There's when the light shines on Richard Dreyfuss's character and he gets sunburnt from it. These are all real things that have happened to people. And we've touched on kind of almost everything in the movie. In previous episodes, in real encounters. So coming back to that whole, is it based on real events in a meta kind of way, or is it based on real events that actually happened? I mean, I suppose I'm jumping a little bit to the summary here, but But for me, I think he's looked through a lot of actual genuine encounters, taken a lot of witness statements, used their experiences to create this script, perhaps dramatised it a bit and come up with this concept of an exchange program, and kind of accidentally stumbled upon something that's really happened.
Perhaps, yeah.
That's my theory. That's my take. Is that he hasn't been party to information about Project Serpo or anything like that, and I don't think Hynek, if Hynek was aware of it, would have revealed it. I also don't think Hynek would have been aware of it anyway, because Hynek's job was to debunk UFOs for the military. The last thing we're going to do, if as a military intelligence officer, if they want you to go around disproving something that it's utter nonsense, the last thing they would do is give you actual evidence that it's true, because that's going to hinder your ability to do that, isn't it?
Now Hynek was he was an astronomer, wasn't he? He was hired by the US Air Force to examine UFO sightings in the late 1940s, and he was also advisor to a group of investigators created by the government to determine whether UFOs posed a threat to America. So he had plenty of inside skinny on
well,
this.
It was less investigative, more debunking.
Yeah, but apparently the more cases he looked at, the more his position changed from skeptic to believer, and said that he gave Spielberg insight into top secret events that allegedly took place in New Mexico in the 1960s. I wonder
that would be Roswell.
No, I mean,
that was 1940s, wasn't it? Yeah.
A separate episode in itself. There was something called the Robertson Panel, which met in January 1953, headed by Howard P. Robertson. It arose from a recommendation for the Intelligence Advisory Committee, and basically what the idea was that we will spread these stories about UFOs to cover up our testing of new military technology. Mm-hmm. So people won't know we're doing it, and then we will have a panel of people who will discredit these UFOlogists, to say there were lots of psychologists on the panel apparently. So basically, anyone who spots one of these a new jet that the US military is trialing, they'll be told it's a UFO, and then they'll be told they belong in the lunatic asylum for believing in UFOs. That's basically it.
Yes. Well, that's
a pincer movement.
That's something we've sort of touched on in previous episodes. That kind of disinformation from governments is not uncommon at all. Not uncommon in the least.
But they would put out I suppose it's an old practice that you put out a story that's completely false, and then when people pick it up, you totally debunk it.
Yeah, and discredit
them. Yeah, totally discredit them.
Is not uncommon. I know. So going right back to one of our first episodes when we talked about Bob Lazar. Now I remember you being at the time very
episode
skeptical.
3.
Episode 3. I know you were very sceptical because there was no real information, it seemed, about him, depending on who you spoke to, of course. But looking at the kind of disinformation that we know happens, that paints sort of Bob Lazar in a bit of a different light, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I expect if we were to discuss him now, you'd have a different take. What do you think? Just as an aside.
I dare say I would. I've seen a lot more material since we last discussed. So it was episode 3. I was a newbie then.
Yeah.
To all this.
Yeah.
So yeah. not
just an interesting
skeptic to believer, but yeah, there is stuff going on, isn't there?
Well, there's a little kind of teaser for our listeners. When we get to our 1-year anniversary episode, I'm planning for us to kind of do a brief review on all the stuff we've covered in the first year. Anyway, so we'll be having a quick chat about Bob Lazar in that one. So we'll see what you think then. But back to the Close Encounters thing in the Robertson report, as you say, it was utter disinformation. But there's been so many different government projects kind of going alongside this. I mean, Project Blue Book, of course, being a famous one, and it seems to conflict in terms of, on the one hand, the government's like really looking into UFOs very, very seriously, taking them very seriously, and on the other, being incredibly dismissive. And it's the public, where it's the ones who interact with the public who are being the dismissive ones. That's an agenda right there, isn't it?
I guess, yeah. I mean, you hear all sorts of stories. Why would they want to suppress these stories if we've made contact with beings from other worlds? Why, what would be the consequence of admitting it?
Panic.
That's what we on the news come out. Mass panic. People are going to mass panic because we've met someone from a more advanced civilization than ourselves. I mean, I always thought it was to do with religion. That, for instance, the Christian religion that I'm not a Christian, but I was certainly had it forced down my throat as a kid that we are God's greatest creation, and if suddenly we encountered someone from another planet or another dimension who seemed to be more advanced and more and superior to us in all sorts of ways, that kind of undermines that whole idea, doesn't it?
That's a theory, and I know there are many theologians who have said, like, well, no, if that's the case, they can also be part of God's creation, and it would lend us to understanding creation that bit better. So I think it depends very much on the individual, but absolutely there will be enough, shall we say, fundamentalist.
Well, I suppose if you tell them that this extraterrestrial being is an angel, they'll swallow that more.
Well, it depends. I mean, there are. I personally spoken with people who very firmly believe that there was one man called Adam, there was one woman called Eve. Now, science has kind of disproven the possibility of that, and I think the general consensus amongst theologians now is that the Bible talks about it in a more metaphorical sense, that Adam represented mankind and Eve womankind, but there are those fundamentalists who still believe that it's to the word. Right, so I'm gonna go down a slight digression here. I remember once I had a lodger live with me. I used to rent out my spare room, and I had a lodger come live with me, and she was a lovely girl. I'm not going to mention names for obvious reasons, but she was a born again Christian, and I remember having a discussion with her about religion and about the Bible, and she said something that just kind of it struck a wrong note with me, like, there was just something off on what she'd said about the Bible. And I looked at her and I said, you do know who wrote the Bible, don't you? Thinking like, the answer being people wrote the Bible, and then it's open to interpretation and all the rest of it. And she said, yes. She said, God wrote it. No. No, it's people. Yeah. No. She said, my church have taught. I've done a course. She'd done a course apparently with her church, and they had told her it was God that wrote the Bible.
So did he have a literary agent? And
there was no way that we
had a publication deal.
Yeah. There was. She absolutely could not accept. There was no way we could have possibly descended from monkeys. It was impossible. No, evolution was just impossible for her.
Well, I'm kind of. You probably don't expect me to say this. I'm kind of on her side, because I was brought up with Church of England, which is fairly wishy-washy. It's it's possibly a metaphor, and Jesus, if he really was one person, or maybe there's an amalgam of several people, or what it's all very, very. But I think if you decide that the Bible is the word of God, whether God actually wrote it or he used people as his channel He got them to write it, but they're right. He's communicating with them. They're writing down the word of God. If you accept that the Bible is the word of God, it either is or it isn't. It's either a book that's been written by some people for whatever purpose, because power was in religion in those days, wasn't it? The churches ran everything at the time it was written, or they came to as a result of it having been written. It's either something that's been written for that reason, or it's the word of God. It's nothing in between. So if you accept that this is the word of God, you have to accept it all at face value. You can't say, well, I believe this bit, but I don't believe that bit. You can't just cherry pick the word of God and say, well, I'll follow that command of his, but I'll ignore that one.
But we know for definite fact that it was written by people, because the books are named after the people who wrote it.
Yeah, but
Leviticus,
so what I'm saying is,
John. It's their interpretation of the events.
What I'm saying is, it's a binary thing. You either believe it or you don't. You can't go this sort of midway path that they tried to foist off on me and say, well, okay, so you don't believe this bit, you don't, and you think, or you're going to say, yes, well, that's right, but what he really means is, why am I bothering with this? Really?
Well, truth is rarely binary, and that's a whole philosophical discussion right there that we could go hours into. No, truth is all about perception, and what is true for one person may not necessarily be true for another.
No, if it's the word of God, he's commanding you. So, God told me this, but what I think he really meant was,
Well, that's an interesting debate, which we're not going to have on this show today.
Not on this episode.
Not on this episode.
Because we're talking about, we're still talking about Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Well, let's bring it back to that with our summary then. At the end of last episode, you gave us that bombshell that you'd only ever seen this movie once, and that was when it first came out. I imagine it's kind of stayed imprinted on your memory, has it?
It did. I mean, I remember it came out roughly round about the same time as the first Star Wars movie. I remember seeing them fairly close together. I think, I went to the cinema to see Star Wars, and then the next time I went to the cinema, I went to see Close Encounters of the Third Kind. However, we should plug this. Close Encounters of the Third Kind is being re-released in cinemas on September the 15th. Pandemic restrictions allowing.
Is that in the UK, or is it a special edition that's been released?
This is according to a UK newspaper. Trying to find the date of... Oh, no. Sorry. Oh, yeah, this article was updated September the 24th, 2020, so I don't know if that bit... But it was originally written in 2017, so there is a director's cut, is it?
Okay, so maybe it's been and gone then.
But it was re-released in cinemas, or either it was re-released in cinemas or it's about to be re-released in cinemas. But either way, I think I should probably watch it again to get with the programme. Oh yeah,
it's on my regular rotation for movies to watch. Is in my movie collection. But yeah, so what do you think? I mean, was this based on real events? Let's cut right to the chase here.
It was based on real accounts. Whether those events actually happened, but certainly on accounts that have been presented as the truth, he weaved a story out of those. That's what. So yeah, in that sense, it was based on real events, but those events might not have actually happened. If you get where I'm going with this.
I do, and one day I'm certain you're going to get splinters from sitting on that fence. I'm going to stick with what I said earlier, which I think, he's exactly as you say. He's taken real events or real accounts, as you rightly say, based a movie on them. I think he stumbled upon something deeper, something bigger, inadvertently as a result of it. But yeah, what do you think, though, listeners, is Close Encounters sailing very, very close to the truth, or is it just all Hollywood fiction? Do let us know, but via the usual means of Facebook and Twitter by searching Aliens Explored, or of course you can visit us at aliensexplored.com. Don't forget to join us next time. We're going a bit more generic next time, aren't we, Neil?
A little bit more generic, yeah.
Yeah, we're going to talk about a specific event that's been in the press, certainly here in the UK quite recently, and I believe in America, with Lieutenant Ryan Graves, who is an ex-pilot for the US Navy. He's been on 60 Minutes talking about events. But more generally than that, we're going to be talking about why it is that there's all this information seemingly coming out into the public in a way that's pretty much unprecedented, and from official sources. Why is that? So yeah, join us for that one. In the meantime, keep watching those movies, even the ones you haven't seen in a very, very long time. And of course, the Skies. Take care for now.
3 years.
Yeah.
Bye bye. Catch you next time.
Aliens Explored is a Figo Films production in association with Juicy Falls. Music by Darren Mafucci and editing by Stu Jackson. Find us on Twitter and Facebook by searching Aliens Explored, or visit aliensexplored.com.